So you sent over some articles about AI in business, and it's interesting, right? Because uh, it feels like everyone and their cousin is talking about AI, like it's the next big thing. But then you look at what companies are actually doing, and it seems like there's, I don't know, a bit of hesitation in the air. So are businesses actually buying what AI is selling, or are we all just, window shopping right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. It does seem like there is a bit of a disconnect, right, between all the hype and what's actually happening out there.
Right.
It's not that businesses aren't adopting AI. They are. It's just that the adoption, um well, let's just say it's looking more like a slow climb than like a rocket launch at this point.
Okay, so that's what we're going to try to unpack in this deep dive.
Hmm.
What's really behind this AI hesitation. And looking at these articles you shared, one of the first things that jumps out is the financial side of things, right?
Hmm.
I mean, AI sounds expensive.
Yeah, for sure. It
It's
can.
like, I don't know, upgrading from a bicycle to a Tesla. But then also, like, you got to factor in the cost of rocket fuel every time you fill up.
Well, the financial aspect is definitely a major factor for businesses. And it's not just the initial cost of getting these systems up and running, right? There are ongoing expenses to consider, things like maintenance, updates. You might even need to restructure certain roles or hire new people with specific skills.
I imagine that's where that whole ROI of AI conversation gets really, really tricky. Like, how do you even measure the return on an investment that's potentially disrupting your entire business model?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. It's tempting to think, okay, if I spend this much on AI, I should see this much return in, say, 6 months. But the reality is, it's just not that simple.
Right?
A good example is how some companies are using AI in customer service. You might invest in an AI-powered chatbot, and yeah, maybe you see some immediate cost savings, but the real value, the long-term benefit, might be in the data those chatbots are collecting,
Interesting.
which can then be used to do all sorts of things like personalize marketing or predict which customers are likely to leave, or even just figure out how to keep customers happy so they spend more over time. And those are things that are much harder to put a precise dollar amount on, at least up front.
So it's less about how much will this cost and more about how could this change the way we do things entirely.
Exactly.
But even if you can get over that initial financial hurdle, there's still the whole tech side of AI, right?
I have to admit, even reading through these articles, I felt a little intimidated. It's a lot to get your head around.
Oh, I totally get it. It can definitely feel that way. And honestly, that's a big barrier for a lot of companies, right? They hear AI and they immediately think, okay, I need to hire a whole team of data scientists just to turn the lights on. But it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Okay, good.
There are actually a ton of user-friendly tools out there designed specifically for businesses that aren't, Google or Amazon. Can you give us an example? Like, what's an AI tool that doesn't require a degree in rocket science to use?
Sure. Think about something like marketing automation. There are AI platforms out there that can analyze your customer data and then do things like personalize email campaigns or target social media ads or even just tell you the best time to send a message, all without you needing to write a single line of code.
Wow.
Or take customer service, like we talked about. AI chatbots can handle a huge volume of those basic questions and requests, which frees up your human agents to deal with the more complex issues.
That makes sense.
So these tools, they're out there. And for a wide range of business needs, too, from HR to finance and everything in between. And the best part is, they're only getting easier to use all the time.
That's good to hear. Okay, so we've talked about the financial side of AI and how it can seem really complex from a tech standpoint. But there's another big concern that came up in these articles, and it's one that I think we all worry about a little data privacy. Like, it can feel a bit like we're handing over the keys to the kingdom to this really powerful technology. Is that a valid concern?
Oh, absolutely. Data privacy is hugely important. I mean,
Yeah.
any business leader who's paying attention should be asking tough questions about that.
Right.
It is a bit like you're bringing on this super efficient intern who can analyze data like nobody's business,
Mhm.
but you also want to make sure they're not accidentally gonna, share company secrets with the competition.
Yeah.
So it's natural to have those concerns. But it's important to remember that alongside AI, there are also a lot of really smart people working on safeguards to make sure that your data is protected.
So it's not just a free-for-all. There are like rules and stuff in place.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about things like encryption. That's where you basically scramble the data so it's unreadable unless you have the key to unscramble it.
Oh, okay.
And then there's also something called data anonymization. So that's where you remove any information that could be used to identify an individual. So even if there was a data breach, no one's personal information would be compromised.
Right.
And then on top of all that, you've got regulations like GDPR, which are specifically designed to protect businesses and individuals when it comes to data privacy.
Okay, so there are layers of protection in place, but it still feels like even with all of that, we're only scratching the surface here, right? I mean, AI isn't just about the technology itself. It's about how it impacts us. It's about people.
Mm,
And that's a whole other layer to this whole thing. Reading through these articles, it really struck me how adopting AI, it's not just about plugging in some new tech, right? It's a whole different way of thinking about your business.
yeah, absolutely. It's a big mental shift.
And that's got to be a big hurdle for a lot of businesses, even the ones that are usually ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it can be tough. And honestly, sometimes the biggest hurdles aren't even about the tech itself.
Okay, now that's interesting. You're talking about those like hidden forces that shape how we see things,
Yeah.
right? Our biases.
Exactly.
So how do those biases play into all of this, especially when you're talking about business decisions around AI?
Well, think about it. You're a business owner. You've spent years, maybe even decades building your company, and you've got a system that works, right? You've had success doing things a certain way.
Right.
And then AI comes along and it's like, hey, I know you've got your way of doing things, but I can do it better. But better often means changing the way you do things. And that can be scary.
It's like that saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But then, like, what if ain't broke is actually could be a whole lot better?
Yeah. It's hard to see the potential when you're comfortable with the way things are.
Yeah.
And that's actually a bias. It's called status quo bias. We naturally tend to stick with what's familiar, even if there are better options out there.
It's like, I don't know, using the same accounting software since the 90s.
Yeah.
Like, there are better options out there, but learning a whole new system just feels like too much.
It's true. And it's not even just about learning the new system. It's the fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
What if this new tech doesn't live up to the hype? Or what if it ends up causing more problems than it solves? What if people lose their jobs because of it? These are all real concerns that business owners have.
Yeah.
And it ties into another bias called loss aversion.
Loss aversion, that's the one where, like, the pain of losing something hits us harder than the joy of gaining something of equal value, right?
Right.
So even if AI could bring all these amazing benefits, the fear of what you might lose control, stability, just the way things have always been, that's what sticks in your head.
Exactly. And this whole idea of robots taking our jobs, it doesn't help. I mean, it is important to talk about how AI is going to affect the workforce, but the reality is way more complicated than just robots are going to take all the jobs.
It's like, I don't know if you've heard this one, but there's that old saying, we shape our tools and then our tools shape us.
Right.
And it feels like that applies to AI too.
Yeah.
It's got the potential to change the way we work, but it's not like this outside force that's in control. We get to decide how to use it.
That's a really good point. And that's why I think it's so important to talk about these psychological barriers. Because once you understand these biases, the ones that we all have, it helps you make clear decisions.
Yeah, you can kind of step back and be like, okay, am I really saying no to this because it's a bad fit? Or am I just, like, scared of change?
Exactly.
So it's like, to really make AI work, you need more than just the right tech or the money to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be something you're ready for on, like, a mental level.
Yeah, mindset is huge. Because if you can take a step back and say, okay, am I afraid of this thing? Or does it just not work for what I'm trying to do? That makes a big difference.
It's like, are you looking at AI as a threat? Or are you seeing it as like a whole bunch of new doors that you could open? But even if you are ready to jump in, where do you even start? I mean, there's so much out there.
Yeah.
It still feels kind of overwhelming.
I get it. It's a lot. But the good news is you don't have to do everything at once. You don't have to, like, turn your whole business upside down on day one.
So maybe, like, dip your toes in the water before you do a cannonball into the deep end.
Exactly. Start small. Figure out one thing AI could help you with. Maybe it's like getting rid of some of those tedious tasks that your accounting team has to do every month. Or maybe it's making your marketing emails a bit more personalized so people actually open them. There are so many ways you can experiment without having to change everything about how you do business.
Right, right. Don't try to boil the ocean or whatever that saying is. But okay, so let's say you want to try this out. There's got to be some help out there, right? Like other businesses have done this, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Tons of resources out there. You've got industry magazines and websites, online forums where people share what they're learning. You could even hire a consultant who specializes in this stuff. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because a lot of people have already gone through this.
So it's more about being curious
Yeah.
and like working together
Yeah,
than it is about being scared of AI, right?
definitely.
It's not some big mystery that's here to take over. It's a tool. And any tool can be used for good or bad, depending on, who's holding it.
That's a great point. We get to decide what the future of AI looks like. The choices we make today, that's what's going to shape things. So yeah, be informed, ask the hard questions, but also be optimistic. Because if we do this right, AI could change things for the better. Not just for businesses, but like for everybody.
This has been awesome. Like, we really got into it today. It's not just headlines, we got into the nitty-gritty. So if there's one big takeaway for our listeners,